Could you tell us about the Royal Proclamation of 1763 and what it meant for the Anishnaabe of Wadding?
Well, the Royal Proclamation is a document that's solely issued by the King and Parliament of England, right? Technically, as Anishnaabe, we had no input into it. It's an imposed declaration. The idea behind it was the government in England and the Crown wanted to set up a means of governing its new colonies that had just won in the 7 Years' War, so Quebec, East and West Florida, and some islands in the Caribbean, as well as a way to manage and mitigate dealings with First Nations. The Americans, men like George Washington, were dealing illegally in Aboriginal lands, causing all sorts of issues. And frontier wars are notoriously expensive for the empire. And the British were, at all means, wanting to avoid that. Now, the reason they created the proclamation was to avoid frontier wars. Why they were scared of frontier wars is the Anishnaabe and our allies, the Shawnee, Chickasaw, Choctaws, Delawares, or the other big players, had basically imposed a border between white settlement and our peoples in the interior, and we drew a line, and basically a line in the forest, and said this is our lands. And the British, knowing that the settlers wanted those lands and knowing that they'd be involved in great expense in dealing with us, especially through the idea of a war of conquest, essentially decided that based on our forceful resistance and our entreaties to them saying this is our land, pass this to try and regulate settlement. So, it was really our actions that forced them to issue that document. Now, what it meant for people in Sault Ste. Marie, it meant that the government or the Crown would have to negotiate treaties with us. It also has a lot of things it doesn't say. It can be argued it's an unofficial recognition of our government systems, because how do you negotiate a treaty with people that have no government, right? It separated us from subjects, so we weren't subject to the Crown, which in one way leads to many bad things, because if you're not subjects, do you have the same rights as subjects, right? Because the invention of citizenship in Canada doesn't occur till 1949, I think. So what are we? We're not subjects. Well, what are we? Well, we're under the government's control, possibly, but so there's issues there. What really means more to us than the proclamation sets out precedents. It's in the Constitution of Canada, and it's been described as a Magna Carta of Aboriginal rights because of what it does contain and what it doesn't contain. But the interesting thing is that I think the 1764 Treaty of Niagara is much more important for us in the long run, but the Government of Canada does not recognize that document.